Hi, I am Dori Azar. In the video segment today, I am going to show you how we can create bots using calligraphy. Calligraphy integrates very well with the IBM Watson bot. Okay, so there is a deep integration between calligraphy and the IBM bot that is called Watson. And what I'm going to show you in this video is how we can do that handshake and how we can connect calligraphy with the IBM Watson. What calligraphy ends up doing is provide you with a UI that actually is capable of understanding the full conversation that or the full dialogue that was created using Watson. And that UI is so versatile that you could use it anywhere in your calligraphy application by either integrating it to the different patterns that you want, and even by styling it to your needs. So let me go ahead and do this. But before I do, I always start by showing where the documentation of the calligraphy quill is. And in fact, the documentation resides in the GitHub of calligraphy under the section wiki. And it has all the exhaustive resources that you need in order for you to better understand and better use all the features and all the capabilities of the calligraphy framework. For the video today, we are concerned with the section about bots, which happens to be under the AI, the artificial intelligence section. And as of this video, it's the first section it's the first part of this section. So let's go in there to creating bots with Watson, and the documentation describes very thoroughly how to connect calligraphy with the with the IBM Watson, but also it tells you if you want to create your own bot out of the box, meaning out of you want to code everything all over again. It gives you ways to do that, or it shows you how this could be done as well. What we're going to be doing today, we are not going to create a bot from scratch. We're going to use the calligraphy distribution of the communication that happens with Watson, and but I am going to show you how to do the handshake with the IBM Cloud. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with this. I'm gonna first show you when we go to the IBM Cloud, which, by the way, if you have an account, it's great. Then you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't have an account yet, I would strongly recommend that you open one. It is free. There's nothing else that needs to be done other than providing your credentials. And once you do, you get on a dashboard that looks somehow like the one we're seeing on our screen today. That would be the IBM Cloud. So it has more than just Watson. It has a lot of capabilities that you could use, and a big part of it is the machine learning capability, as well as some blockchain capabilities as well. So anything that the IBM Cloud provides as features and capabilities are all available to you to use from within this web application. The part that we're concerned with is Watson. So if I go into the menu of IBM Cloud, I scroll a little bit down, there is a section in here called a service in here called Watson, which you can find. So let's go ahead and click on Watson, and it's going to open up Watson, and the Watson landing page. Now I've already created an assistant, and by an assistant it means it's a bot. Okay, so if you don't want to call it a bot, you can call it an assistant. I already created one for the purpose of this video, so I'm going to go ahead and open it. We'll give it a couple of seconds in here. Now when it opens up, every assistant that you create has different skills. Okay, and now in this particular case I happen to have two assistants. The one that we're going to be using is called Kali, and Kali happens to use one of the many skills that we've built in here. The skill that we're going to be using is workforce management, except that it has nothing to do with workforce management. But let's go ahead and check what this skill is about. So I'm going to go ahead and open that skill. And that's how every Watson structure is is like. It's always an assistant, and within each and every assistant there is one or multiple skills. Now the skill itself, what does it mean to have a skill? It's the ability of the assistant to perform certain tasks for you. Okay, that's what a skill is. So it's the ability to understand the conversation and to perform certain tasks on your behalf. Now the skill that we just created is very, very simple. It has nothing nothing out of the ordinary in there. It's actually pretty dull, and what it does is it shows you either a cat or a dog based on what you ask from it. It shows you a picture of a cat or a dog. That's really all it does. And of course you can engage in the conversation with them by introducing yourself and things like that. But as a skill, what it does primarily is the ability to provide to either show you the picture of a cat or a picture of a dog. Now, before I get in there, I'm not going to spend time explaining to you how to build a Watson assistant. Why? Because the Learning Center of IBM is actually pretty exhaustive, and you can go in there, you can get great video tutorials as well as documentation on understanding how to better build an assistant, and they definitely will do a way better job than I would do. However, I do want to drive your attention toward primarily three main concepts that you need to look at if you are trying to get a crash course on Watson. In fact, in any bot framework, whether it be IBM Watson, whether it be a dialogue from Google, or whether it be any other assistants such as the Facebook one and so on and so forth. There are always some main paradigms used across all of these framework. And this is what you need to probably focus your attention on if you're doing tutorials in the Learning Center. There is the concept of an intent, and there's a concept of an entity, and then there's the concept of the actual construct of a conversation, which is the dialogue. Okay, those three things are probably the main things that or the main concepts that are needed in creating any conversation with the machine. Okay, the intent, if I were to give you the quick definition of it, it's nothing more but the context of the conversation. So it is this ability of this framework to tell the bot, or to train the bot to recognize the context of a conversation. So what is the context of a conversation? It's what the conversation is generally about. Okay, it's the topic of the conversation or the topic of the dialogue. That's what an intent is. Then there is the entity. The entity is literally who or what, meaning the subject or the object of what the conversation is about. So is the conversation about cats? Is it about dogs? Is it about people? So it's the ability for the bot or the assistant to recognize who or what, the who's and the what's that the conversation is about. And third, meaning that last piece, is how to drive the dialogue, is literally how to build the flow of the conversation, which ends up being a dialogue. So basically, based on certain conditions of either the intent or the entity, then the bot could respond in certain ways. Okay, so if, for example, the system or the bot detects that they are in this particular context of the conversation, talking about this particular entity, then it will respond in a certain way. And that's exactly what this dialogue or what dialogue is how do you build this flow based on the understanding of the assistant, of the intent, and the entities. Okay, and the dialogue is nothing more but a series of conditions that needs to be checked across across the flow. So and it ends up going into different states. So think about it as a finite state machine, if you may. Okay, and that goes into different states based on certain conditions. So for example, there might be a state called an introductory state or a welcome state. In that state, or in that part, or in that step of the dialogue, when does the bot go into this state? It's when the assistant recognizes the intent of an introduction. So if the system recognizes that the user is trying to engage or is in an introduction state, meaning they're trying to introduce themselves by saying hello, by saying hi, how are you, etc., then that's when it goes into that state. That's the entry condition for that step. So then what does it do from the moment it recognizes that it's in that state? That's what this whole thing is about. You actually start defining what it needs to do when it's in that state. It might check for other statuses. It might check for other states. It might check for other entities. It might check to see if it's in a certain intent, or if it recognizes a certain intent, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then based on what it checks for, then it might respond in multiple different ways. And this is what something like the IBM Watson helps you achieve in a very structured and in a very formative and instructive way. It allows you to build your flow very efficiently. So this is an example of the assistant recognizing itself being in a state, then checking for a certain condition, and if that certain condition happens, then the assistant would respond in a certain way. And if it doesn't happen, then it would respond in a different way. Okay, and your entire dialogue would be built in that same way, step by step. And you might need to add more step, and in some cases have sub steps of a step, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the Learning Center of IBM teaches you all this. What matters to us as part of this video is to really understand how calligraphy communicates with this flow in here. And in order for us to do this, that's when now we need to go back and get the if you want, the settings of the assistant that we're going to be using. And those settings are nothing more but typical API credentials, because the way Caligraphy is going to be talking to the IBM Watson is through API requests. It's going to be able to engage in a conversation by sending requests, or by posting certain parameters to the API. And so we need the API key for sure in order to do that handshake, and we definitely need the assistant ID, which I will show you how to do all this. So where do we input all that information? We're going to go to our VS Code, and what I currently have in front of you here is a fresh instance of well, it's not fresh in my case, but it could be done using a fresh instance. In my case, I've used it for other tutorials, but in your case, if it's a fresh instance, it could be slightly different than what I have in here. But everything that I'm going to be doing with you today also applies to the fresh instance of Caligraphy that you might have with you. So what we need to do is first take that API key, that Watson API key, and put it in our environment variable, so in our .env file. And we're going to do that. So I'm going to copy the API key, and I'm going to input it, and I'm going to paste it in the Watson API key variable that is in our environment file. Great. So now the handshake could happen. Okay, now there's something else that we need to do based, of course, on the documentation in here. What we need to do next is we need to create an out-of-the-box boilerplate code by using the calligrapher command line. So it allows you to create a boilerplate code for your bot that could immediately get you started very quickly. So how do we do that? We're going to call calligrapher, and we're going to say bot, and we're going to name it. In our case, let's name it Cali, just because it's funner, given that we're talking about calligraphy over here. So let's call it Cali. The project has been created for us. Let's go cd public /Cali just to get an insight on what it is. And you see that in there's an index.php file, and then there's a bunch of scripts under the scripts folder. Let's go ahead and see them in our VS Code. So let me close this. Let's go to public. Let's go to Cali. And we have an index.php file, which is a boilerplate HTML kind of code that gets us all the packages and all the dependencies that we need in order to run our application. And this is, by the way, a view a view application. Okay, so what Calligraphy is going to give you, it's a view boilerplate code in order to be able to use the Watson API. So that's the HTML part of it. Notice that it uses a bot UI component in here, and that bot UI component is actually defined in our main JavaScript file. Okay, so in there, this is where our component, our bot UI component is, and it has a bunch of methods. That is some of it about sending actions, adding messages, adding context, connecting to the bot, communicating, and so on and so forth. You could go ahead and reverse engineer it if you may. That would be a good starting point if you want to know exactly what the API or how the Watson service works within Calligraphy. But and the documentation, by the way, could tell you all about this in the second part. Under the creating your own bot client side UI, it gives you all the fundamentals that you need in order for you to create your own bot, if you may, if you don't want to necessarily use the one that comes out of the box with Calligraphy. So I strongly encourage you to create your own, just out of practice. But if you just want to be able to use a bot very quickly, then you can definitely rely on this code as is, because you will see it provides you already with a UI that connects immediately with the Watson assistant. So let's go ahead and see that UI, because so far what we have is an application, a boilerplate application that is already built for us. But how do we access it? And that's the part that maybe you need to pay more attention to, and that would be all done through our routing within Calligraphy. So if you go to our web.php routes, out of the box, Calligraphy comes pre-packaged with certain dedicated URLs or certain dedicated routes that specifically for bots. Okay, so you will see we have two types of routes in here. There are some bot page routes and there are some bot data routes. The bot page routes is really where your UI is going to be. So what this tells you, it tells you that if you append the root URL of the application, you add to it bot slash the bot name. In our case, we named it Cali. So if we do bot slash Cali, then it's going to run our application for us. And we'll go ahead and see how this is done. Notice that over here, it tells you that you need to append the bot skill ID to it. So we will go ahead and do that. Those are the page routes. We will see that in a while. But before I do that, I want to pay your attention to the bot data routes. The data routes are really the endpoints of the API. Okay, so the endpoints of the Watson API. So those are, if you want, the endpoint that Calligraphy allows you to use in order to interface with the Watson API. And there are 3 of those routes. There is one that's a post, which its purpose is to actually communicate with the Watson API. Another one is for connecting, and a third one is for deleting the instance itself, meaning ending the conversation. So those 3 are the ones that are provided for you out of the box. And communicate is actually an endpoint that allows you to do a lot of the heavy lifting of the exchange in the conversation. If you don't want to know more how all of these work, I would strongly recommend that you open the controller for it, because there's a controller behind the scene that is doing all this for you, and that controller is under the controllers folder, under core, under AI, and then you will see that there is a Watson controller.php that has 3 different controllers in it, or 3 different commands in it, or actions in it: the connect, the communicate, and the end. And communicate is really the one that handles the conversation with the Watson API, with Watson in general. So most of the dialogue happens using that communicate action, or using that communicate method. Okay. All right, so without further ado, let me now show you how we could connect to or how we could run our bot. So I'm going to go localhost. I'm going to say my calligraphy, and then we said we need to do bot, and yes, it is called Cali, and we're going to have to append the parameter called bot skill ID, and I'm going to get that skill ID, which seems to be already there, but I'm going to double check. Let me remove this one, and we're going to go take it directly from, and I think I closed this, so let me open it again, from our Watson assistant information. So we said we were using Cali. We're going to go to the settings, and in here we're going to take that assistant ID, and I'm going to copy it and put it for bot skill ID. And ideally this should do it. So now if I run this, notice I'm already connecting. It says hi there. I'm going to say hi. Okay, it says hi, I'm Cali. What's your name? I'm going to say my name is John. It's like, hi John, nice to meet you. What can I do for you? I don't know. What are my options? I can either show you a picture of a dog or show you a picture of a cat. Okay, great. Show me a picture of a dog. Great. This is a picture of a dog. Okay, great. Show me a cat. And now shows me a picture of a cat. So all this to tell you that, no matter whether we find this a ridiculous conversation or not, ideally this is exactly what this assistant is doing. And the conversation that we built earlier, that we saw earlier, which is that skill, is actually meant to show me either a cat or a dog. And notice this is exactly the one that this bot or this calligraphy interface is showing us. For the show dog, it's getting the image from there. For the show cat, it's getting the image from there. Okay, so this is exactly what calligraphy is meant to do with all these capabilities and features. In this particular case, it is handshaking with Watson, and it's providing you with a quick bot that you could create out of the box immediately that connects with your Watson conversation or the Watson dialogue that you create. Now this UI is very rudimentary in a sense that it's very basic, right? But it's meant to be like this because it can be used in multiple or in multiple different ways. You could decide to take this UI and put it in a dialogue of its own and have that dialogue being triggered by a button that is floating on the page. Either way, whatever your intent is, this application could be integrated in any user interface of your choice. And in order to do that, if we go back to the public, if we go back to the index.php, or even to the main, whichever way you want, by taking this bot UI tag and using this UI as a starting point for your application could help you do a lot of things. Okay. So I hope this tutorial was helpful to you. Please keep checking our tutorials. I strongly advise you to go and read the documentation as well, and also to try and do your own bot out of the box in order to familiarize yourself with the different things that can be done with the Watson service or with the Watson API that Caligraphy has for you. You will have a skeleton code that is given to you in the documentation, so you won't start from scratch, but it helps you better understand how you could converse with the Watson bot. With that, I hope this was useful, and see you next time. Thank you for your time.